the city wakes slowly, not with horns or iron wheels, but with the scrape of broom on stone, the cough of wood smoke, and the soft splash of water as barrels are rolled through puddles on Watling Street. This is London, my London, before the gaslight and the glass, before carriages and clocks and clean lines. It is a place of timber and tile, of bells and mud, of chimney soot and river mist, where the days begin with prayer and end in flickering candlelight. I was born not far from Bow Church, in a crooked house that leaned gently to one side. The floor sloped toward the street. Rain would gather in a puddle near the front door, and every few days my mother would soak it up with rags. When I was little, I thought the house might slide right off its foundation and tumble into the road, but it never did, not once in 50 years. Our homes here are stubborn things, built from oak beams, thick plaster, and tile roofs that sigh in the wind. Each leans on its neighbour, row after row like hands clasped in prayer. If one were to fall, it might take the whole lane with it, but somehow we all stay upright. London is a city of closeness. The streets are narrow, hemmed in by walls and overhangs that press in from both sides. In many places, a man could reach from one window to another without stepping from his sill. You hear everything here: the clatter of boots on cobble, the call of the bellman, the mutter of priests at dawn. You smell everything too: bread from the ovens, dung from the carts, and sweet lavender from the bundles hung above shop doors. We are not a city of wide boulevards or open vistas. Ours is a city of turns and passages, of archways and alleys, of churches tucked into corners and courtyards hiding quiet wells. In the early hours, before the market wakes, it is almost beautiful. The mist rolls in from the Thames like a breath, curling along the rooftops. You can see your own breath rise up to meet it. There is a dampness here that never quite leaves you, no matter how dry the hearth or how thick the cloak. The fog settles in your bones, familiar like an old friend, and always there are the bells: St. Paul's, St. Mary Le Bow, St. Dunstan's. The sound rolls over the rooftops in waves, low, round tones that mark the hours as if time itself were being ladled out by hand. The bells begin before the sun rises, a long toll to call the bakers and brewers from their beds, a shorter one to summon the boys who carry water, the women who sweep, and the men who walk the city in silence, checking that the gates are still closed. The first sound of the day is not roosters, it is bells, then footsteps, then the creak of a shutter being pushed open. Then the city begins. I have known this rhythm all my life. As a boy, I would lie in bed and count the bells, trying to guess the hour. My father said you could tell the time to within 5 minutes if you listen closely. I still do it now, even though the old wooden clock on our mantel ticks away the hours faithfully. The bells come before the clock. They always do. The houses here grow tall, 3 and 4 stories in some places. Space is precious. We build upward, layer upon layer. Cellars hold the salted fish and firewood. The ground floor is for work, cooking, crafting, selling. Above that, the family rooms. And at the top, tucked just beneath the eaves, the sleeping quarters, small, dark, and always warm from the heat below. From the garret window, you can look down and see the streets swell with life. Men in plain woolen coats carrying baskets of nails. Women in aprons with their sleeves tied high, laughing in clusters. Children darting through the legs of horses, their shoes splashed with filth and joy. The air smells of ash and bread and damp wood. And over it all, the sky, grey in winter, golden in summer. sometimes pale and cloudless like parchment waiting to be written on. London is never quiet, not truly. Even at its stillest, there is the hum of movement, distant hooves, murmuring voices, the sigh of timber settling into stone. It is an old city, but never a sleepy one. Even now, in my quiet years, I wake with the rhythm of the market. I rise not because I must, but because I always have. There is comfort in that, the small rituals, the way light spreads through the shutters, the sound of a broom sweeping the stones outside our door. The street where I live is narrow and slightly curved, like a bent spine. At the end of it, a cart is being pulled from the shadows. Its wheels leave damp ruts in the mud. A woman in a blue shawl sets out a crate of apples. A boy runs past with a bundle of rushes under one arm. A dog barks, and someone laughs. The city is waking. Somewhere, a fishmonger is rinsing his stall with water drawn from a well. The boards are scrubbed clean, though they'll soon be covered in silver-scaled mackerel and red snapper. Across the lane, a baker is already stacking rounds of dark bread on a cloth-covered bench. Steam rises from the crust. He will sell them all by midday. Behind him, in the windows of a shop that sells thread and linen, I see movement. Fingers tying back curtains, a broom handle tapping the sill. Above the shop, a shutter creaks open. A young woman leans out and begins shaking crumbs from a cloth. Watching them fall like snowflakes onto the stones below, these are the moments I love most. Not the great feasts or parades or sermons. Just this. Bread cooling on a sill, rain dripping from a drainpipe, a voice singing a psalm in an upstairs room. Life here is not grand, but it is constant. It carries on through fog and frost, through feast and fast. And if you listen closely, it tells you everything. The stones beneath your feet have heard 1,000 voices. The walls remember. The bells keep time, but the streets keep memory. We are all part of this city, woven into its fabric like threads in a woolen cloak. Each of us has left something behind, a footprint, a word, a scent. And so, with the rising of the mist and the calling of the bells, we begin. This day, like so many others, in the heart of medieval London. The city does not awaken all at once. It stirs in layers. First the sound of bells, then the creak of doors, then the slow turning of wheels over stone. I have always loved this hour, neither night nor day, but something in between. The mist still clings to the ground. The air smells of peat smoke and damp rushes. You can hear your own footsteps echo, as if the street itself is still asleep. I step outside just as the second bell of the morning is sounding from St. Mary le Bow. It rings softer than Saint. Pause, but closer. The tones feel rounder, more human. They don't so much command the hour as suggested. Gently. This is when the city stretches its limbs. Water boys begin their rounds. You can hear the slap of their buckets, the glug and slosh, as they carry them to households not lucky enough to have a well of their own. I remember being one of those boys, barefoot in winter, fingers cracked and red from the cold, but proud to be part of the city's rhythm. It is one of the first jobs given to children, and one of the last they forget. The lanes glisten this morning. It must have rained late in the night. The mud is soft, not yet trampled into ruts by passing carts. Reflections shimmer in the puddles, brick and wood and cloudy sky. A woman steps across the muck, lifting her skirt with one hand, balancing a basket with the other. On Bread Street, the bakers have already lit their ovens. You can smell it before you see it. Warm yeast and ash. They rise early, always, kneading dough by candlelight, while the rest of the world sleeps. The first loaves are already on the shelves, brown and rough and round like stones pulled from the earth. There are sweet buns too, though they are rarer, reserved for feast days or for the wealthier homes. The baker's wife stands by the door, her hands still dusted with flour. She nods as I pass. I nod back. We don't speak. There's no need. We've nodded to each other every morning for 20 years. Around the corner, on Milk Street, a pair of girls are setting out pots of cream and small cloth-wrapped bundles of cheese. Their stall is no more than a table beneath a sagging canvas, but it will serve a dozen customers before the hour is done. They call softly. None of the midday shouting has started yet. The city is still whispering. A boy jogs past with a bell tied to his belt. He's too young to be an apprentice, but old enough to be helpful. He's probably running errands for his mother, a message to a cousin, or a borrowed bit of salt or soap. He nearly trips in a puddle, but doesn't. He grins at me and disappears into a doorway. These streets belong to everyone and no one. We walk them as children, run them as youths, carry burdens through them as adults. We sweep them, wash them, spill things in them, mend them when they break. But they are not ours. They are older than us, and they will outlive us. At the corner of Watling Street and Friday Street, a man is pushing a cart filled with salted fish. The herring glint in the grey light. He is singing softly under his breath, an old sea tune maybe, or something his mother sang when he was a boy. His boots leave long, dark smears in the mud behind him. A goose honks somewhere, then another. The sound echoes off the stone like laughter. Water trickles through the gutters along the edge of the lane. It carries bits of hay, crumbs of bread, a fallen sprig of thyme. Every so often, a servant with a broom comes out and clears the path in front of their master's shop. Not because they must, but because clean stones mean good business. A tidy doorstep says you are trustworthy. And in a city like ours, where words travel faster than carts, trust is everything. I pause at the well near Honey Lane. The water is cold and clean, drawn from a rope and pulley system built long before I was born. A woman draws 2 buckets and pours them into a large barrel. She dips a cup and hands it to a child who has followed her, shivering in the mist. The girl drinks, then laughs at the cold. The mother smiles and lifts the child onto her hip. Moments like that slip past, unnoticed, but they are the true shape of our lives here. Not coronations or processions, but a shared cup of water at dawn. Further along, I pass the shambles, the meat market. The stores are mostly empty still, but you can already smell the iron tang of blood and tallow. Soon the butchers will arrive, knives tied to their belts, aprons stiff from the day before. Their trade is loud and ungraceful, but necessary. Near the market, a stray cat weaves between barrels. She glances at me, but does not stop. She is lean and quick, and already knows which stalls will drop scraps. I have seen her before. We all have. There is familiarity in everything here. In the tilt of a roof line, the chipped corner of a stair, the way certain windows glow earlier than others. You come to know the city not as a whole, but in pieces. The stones you step over each day, the smell of bread from one house and vinegar from another, the voice of the woman who sells garlic, the jingle of a bell that marks the knife sharpener's path. It's not just a city, it's a memory repeated over and over, each day slightly changed. A group of monks passes in silence, their heads bowed. They walk in pairs, their sandals quiet on the wet stones. Behind them, a younger novice carries a bundle of firewood. He shifts the weight and looks around, taking in the smells and sounds with the wide eyes of someone still new to the city. He catches my eye, and I nod. He looks startled, then nods back and smiles. The bells ring again. This time from St. Lawrence Jewelry. A brighter sound, quicker, like the clearing of a throat. It marks the end of the early hour. The street is no longer misty and half empty. Now it is full. Voices rise. Barrels are rolled into shops. Stalls are opened wide, linen tied back with twine. People begin to call out, not loudly yet, but with purpose. Fresh milk, salted herring, woolen scraps, clean rushes for your floor. A cart wheels past, the axles creaking. On it are baskets of onions, turnips and leeks. The driver flicks the reins and whistles to his horse. At the edge of the market, a woman drops a wooden ladle. It clatters to the ground and rolls. A man picks it up, hands it back with a nod. She smiles and tucks it back into her apron. The city is not beautiful, not like the green hills beyond the wall, or the paintings they say hang in noble houses. But there is beauty here, in the rhythm, in the repetition, in the shared labor of hundreds of lives pressed close together. There is beauty in the scrape of broom on stone, in the clink of coins, the warmth of a hand on a child's shoulder, the smell of bread at dawn. In the bells, always the bells. They do not mark time as a command. They are not loud enough to interrupt or jolt. They simply suggest the shape of the day, a beginning, a middle, an end. And this now is morning in London. By now, the streets are awake. Not just stirred, but fully alive, with motion, with voices, with trade. Cheapside, the heart of it all, pulses like a vein carrying the lifeblood of the city. And if you stand still for even a moment, you can feel it. The flow of people, the clatter of wooden wheels, the flutter of linen in the wind, the murmur of 1,000 transactions that make up our day. Cheapside is not a single street, but a living organism. It stretches from the shadow of St. Paul's all the way east, connecting lanes with names that speak of their trades: Bread Street, Milk Street, Wood Street, Ironmonger Lane. Each one spilling into the next like water finding its level. The stones here are worn smooth from centuries of footfall. Shop fronts lean forward with age, timber beams darkened by smoke and weather. Signs hang overhead, painted with lions, crowns, barrels and stars. For most who pass, these symbols are the only language they read. I walk slowly, as I always do, past the stalls and cells. The stalls are simple, wooden platforms, some covered by canvas, others open to the sky. Here, sellers lay out their goods on cloths or straw. Apples in heaps, linen folded in piles, candles in bundles bound with twine. The vendors call softly at first, then louder as the crowd thickens. Woolen offcuts, good ribbons, see how they shine in the light. New rushes, keep your floors sweet and dry. Some sellers sit behind their goods, nodding to passers-by. Others stand, moving constantly, gesturing with open hands or tapping their wares for attention. A few children help, mostly daughters, sweeping dust from crates, holding coins tight in small fists. To the side of the street are the cells. They are older, tucked in narrow lanes that branch from Cheapside like ribs from a spine. The cells are semi-enclosed, like covered markets or arcades. Stone walls, arched entries, wooden benches and stalls inside. Some crammed so tightly you must walk sideways to pass. Others echo with quiet, their goods kept behind shutters, opened only when a trusted buyer appears. The painted celled is the one I like best. Its sign still bears colour, faded but proud. Reds and ochres, a fleur-de-lis in a golden frame. Inside there are glove sellers, buckle makers, women who stitch purses from soft leather, and men who weigh spices on little brass scales. The air smells of nutmeg, beeswax, and something faintly floral. Lavender, perhaps, hung in a bundle above the doorway. In this quiet shade, the world feels smaller. The noise of the street dulls. You can hear the creak of stools, the tap of a knife against a cutting board, the low hum of a song being sung softly under someone's breath. Outside again, the sunlight glances off metal and glass. The goldsmiths are further along, clustered around Foster Lane and Old Change. Their shops are more formal, windows barred with iron, doors locked tight except during trade. Inside they weigh rings and coins, counting slowly, methodically. Their work is quiet, precise, guarded, and yet their presence gives this part of the city a certain weight, a sense that something lasting is being done here. Between them, apprentices move quickly, boys not more than 14, their tunics neat, their faces earnest. They carry small parcels wrapped in cloth, nodding to their masters as they return from errands. These are the future goldsmiths, learning the rhythm of trade by walking its path again and again. And then there are the sellers with no shops at all. Hawkers, mostly women, who drift through the crowd with baskets balanced on hips or carried on backs. They sell what they can. Green rushes for covering floors, pins, herbs, boiled sweets. Their voices are higher, more urgent, threading through the street like ribbons in the wind. Rushes for your rooms, sweet and fresh. Sweetmeats, good for the throat. Bay leaves and thyme, bless your stew. They do not stay still. They walk in patterns, up Cheapside, down Friday Street, up again, weaving through slower feet, darting around carts, sometimes calling, sometimes silent. They are the thread between stalls, the soft motion that keeps the marketplace breathing. And though they seem alone, they are not. Each knows the faces of the others. They nod, they trade glances, they share space without touching. They are a sisterhood of motion. A cart rolls past, heavy with dried fish. The wheels groan. Behind it, a man leads a donkey bearing sacks of barley. Two boys run after them, pointing, laughing. A constable calls to keep the way clear. A rooster flaps from a barrel. A dog barks. A girl drops a handful of beans and kneels quickly to gather them. This is Cheapside. It is not clean. It is not quiet. But it is alive in every sense of the word. Above the shops, windows open. Cloths are hung out to dry. You can hear voices inside, mothers scolding, children humming, the clink of pans. The city lives not only on the street, but above it, around it, within it. I pass the shop where I once worked, a linen merchant, long since gone. I remember the feel of bolts of fabric on my arms, the scent of lye and soap, the way the floor creaked beneath the corner shelf. It is a shoemaker's now. The windows are different, the sign new, but the building remains. The city does not forget what it once was. It simply layers itself, like cloth upon cloth, each generation sewn gently atop the one before. A man stands on a ladder, repairing a shutter. His son holds the nails, passing them one by one. A woman carries a chicken in a basket. An old man leans on a cane, pausing to rest against the wall of St. Mary le Bow. And through it all, there is commerce. Not just the exchange of goods, but the exchange of words, of glances, of time. A seller tells a joke, a buyer laughs, a deal is made, or maybe it isn't. The rhythm continues either way. The city does not pause for one trade. It moves like water, always shifting, always filling the space that's given. From Cheapside, You can follow the smells, smoke, tallow, rosemary, salt, and end up at the edge of the shambles, or turn and find yourself near Guildhall, where clerks and merchants discuss debts and weights and matters too dry for morning light. But here, in this stretch of street, the city shows its face. Not the face of kings or aldermen, but of wool merchants, spice sellers, candle makers, girls who carry trays of pears, boys who sharpen knives. This is where London lives, and I walk it each day, not because I must, but because I can, because every step reminds me that I am part of it, woven into its breath and voice and memory. This is the city, and it is good. There is a kind of silence in childhood, not the quiet of a sleeping room, but something else. The hush that comes before you speak your first word, the stillness before you understand how long a life can be. When I think of childhood, I don't remember a single moment. I remember a feeling of wool against skin, of sunlight through lattice, of not knowing what came next and not needing to. I was born here, within these streets, somewhere near the bells of Bow and the smell of yeast from Bread Street. My mother gave birth to me in a room above a shop, with a midwife whispering prayers and hot water steaming in bowls. I was small, they told me, late to cry, but early to open my eyes. They named me after my uncle, and my godfather gave me a small coin, pressed into my swaddled hand, though I could not hold it. Baptism came quickly, as it always does. The church was cold. The priest's voice echoed in the high stone vaults, and when the holy water touched my brow, I was told I blinked, but did not flinch. My mother smiled at that. She said it meant I was meant for the city. In those first years, the world was narrow. It began with the edge of the cradle and ended at the fire. My feet did not touch the ground often. I was carried, tucked in blankets, wrapped and held and passed from arm to arm. And then, one day, I was not carried anymore. I was walking. I was speaking. I was lifting things and being told no. And that was the beginning of remembering. Our games were small, bits of chalk on stone, hoops made of bent wood, shells collected and traded, scraps of cloth tied around dolls made from straw. We played in alleys, careful to keep close to home. There were no gardens, not for us. Only the spaces between carts and doors, between meals and lessons. There was joy, but also caution. We were taught to listen before we acted, to bow our heads when we passed a priest, to move quickly if we heard a wheel on stone, or the cry of a master calling for his servant. Some went to school, not all. I was lucky. There was a small school behind the church of St. Martin, a narrow room with benches and a fire that smoked more than it warmed. We learned letters first, then numbers. We read from psalters, repeating the same verses again and again, until the words became part of our breath. The teacher had a voice like gravel. He coughed often and carried a rod, though he used it less than he showed it. We wrote on wax tablets, our fingers stiff from cold. Mist crept beneath the doors in winter, and in summer the light made us squint. But still, we came, because learning was a gift, because it meant more choices, more chances, because our parents had scraped to give us this. Not all children stayed long. Some left school to sweep or stitch, to grind flour or sell rushes. Others were apprenticed. Boys sent off with signed papers and folded blankets. Girls placed into houses not their own, to serve and learn and someday marry perhaps. There was always a leaving. Childhood was not a place you lingered in. It was a hallway you passed through, a path from holding your mother's hand to carrying buckets of water on your own. Some of the girls I knew were gone by 10, sent into homes where they scrubbed floors and held infants, where they answered to names not theirs and learned to wake before dawn. They wore aprons too large and shoes too small, and when they returned home, if they returned at all, they were different, quieter, tired in ways they could not explain. I remember one girl. Her name was Alice, or perhaps Anne. She lived 3 doors down and laughed with her whole body. She could balance a stick on her hand and never let it fall. Then one day, she was gone. Word spread. She had been placed in service in a wealthier household, closer to the river, where the houses had more rooms and fewer smiles. We did not see her again. That was the way of things. Boys left too, apprenticed to smiths or tailors or grocers. They wore their new tunics with pride at first, stiff and clean. But soon the sleeves were worn, the hands calloused. They came home smelling of metal or ink or glue. I was apprenticed to a linen merchant. My mother cried when I left, not because it was far, only 2 streets over, but because it meant I was no longer hers in the same way. My master was stern but fair. He taught me the weight of cloth, how to fold without creasing, how to tell the difference between wool scraped smooth and true linen spun fine. He had a wife who kept the accounts and a daughter who spoke very little. We worked in quiet most days. The door opened and the customers came and went. I swept, I sorted, I listened. I learned to see without being seen. That is how you grow up here, not with ceremony or grand declarations, but with repetition, with small tasks done again and again until they become muscle memory, with being trusted to carry something, to hold the keys, to make the fire. Girls, too, carried their weight. They mixed herbs, mended garments, soothed crying children. They knew which corners of the market stayed dry in rain, which shopkeepers offered the best price before the hour of none. They knew how to disappear when the city turned cruel, because it did sometimes. There were moments, a shouted word, a door slammed too hard, a hand reaching where it should not, that reminded you how narrow safety could be. But even then, there was kindness. A neighbor who looked out a window and said your name. A baker who slipped you an extra roll. A sister who walked with you a little further, just to be sure. In childhood, the world is big. Too big sometimes. But in this city, it was also close. It held you, if not always gently, then always completely. You belonged to it, to your street, your block, your lane, to your church, your trade, your neighbors. And slowly, as your legs grew stronger, you walked from one life to the next, from a child who was watched to a child who watched others, from someone who played to someone who prepared the tools for others to play. And in that quiet crossing, something changed. You didn't notice it at first, but one day, someone handed you a list, and you read it aloud without thinking. And another day, you answered the door without looking back. And a week later, your mother asked you what time the bells rang. And you knew. That was how you knew you'd grown. Not because someone said it, but because you moved differently through the streets. And the streets noticed. The street does not belong to anyone. Not the mayor, not the merchant, not the monk. It belongs to the city itself. A long stone ribbon of voices, footsteps and dust. If you want to understand London, you do not go to the court, or the church, or the counting house. You go to the street. We have many streets, but Cheapside is the spine. It carries the city's weight, its carts and its gossip, its scents and silences. And along it, like beads on a string, are the places we gather. The first of them is the cross. The Eleanor Cross stands tall in Cheapside, where 4 wards meet. It was raised long ago by a king for his queen, who died far from home. They say he loved her dearly. He built crosses in every town her coffin rested in, and ours is among them. It is not small. It rises high above the heads of men and merchants, carved with saints and angels, faces worn smooth by wind and rain. On feast days, it is garlanded with flowers. On market days, it is surrounded by stalls. On ordinary days, it simply stands, watching. Beneath it, people meet. 2 apprentices exchange parcels. A girl waits with a bundle of bread. An old man sits with his back to the stone and hums. The cross is not just a monument. It is a compass, a seat, a shade. Children play in its shadow. Vendors lean their elbows on its base. Messengers pass beneath it, pausing to catch their breath. It listens to everything and says nothing. Just beyond it is the conduit. The great conduit was built to bring clean water into the city, from far outside the walls, through lead pipes buried beneath the streets. It rises like a tower, square and solemn, with taps and basins on each side. People come here for water, servants with buckets, cooks with pails, boys with flasks strapped to their belts. They wait in line, chatting softly, as the water trickles out, slow, steady, cold. There is always a queue, sometimes laughter, sometimes quarrels. But no matter the hour, the water flows. It is clean, and that is rare. Most of our wells taste of earth, or worse. But this water, drawn from springs beyond the noise of the city, is clear. You can see your fingers through it. You can taste the stone it passed over. They say the conduit was built not just for convenience, but for charity, for the poor who cannot pay, for the sick who need washing. And so it stands, near the stocks market and the fruit stalls, surrounded by people, by baskets, by dripping wood. On hot days, children run beneath it, shrieking with joy. On cold mornings, steam rises from it like breath. I once saw a woman baptize a baby with conduit water. She scooped it gently, with cupped hands, and whispered a prayer. No priest, no altar, just water, and a name and love. That was enough. These places, cross and conduit, are more than stone. They are our public hearths, our open rooms, our theatres and our courts. Near the cross, proclamations are read aloud. A man with a scroll and a strong voice stands upon a box. The people gather round. He tells of new laws, of market tolls, of royal decrees. Some listen, some pretend to, some argue, others shrug. But still, he reads. And once, I saw a man punished there. He had lied about weight, cheated his customers, and so his false measures were burned at the base of the cross. He stood beside them, head bowed, while the fire crackled. No one shouted, no one laughed. The silence was heavier than any sentence. That is how it often is here. Punishment is not meant for the guilty alone. It is meant for the watching, for the passer-by, for the child clutching a mother's hand, for the apprentice carrying a loaf of bread who stops, just briefly, to see. We remember these things. We remember the woman who sold rotten fish and was paraded with a wreath of cod. We remember the baker who added chalk to his flour and was tied to a cart. We remember the man who swore falsely in court and walked barefoot to the church, holding a candle as long as his arm. These acts mark the street as surely as wheels mark the mud. But there is joy here too. Music drifts between stalls. A fiddler plays near the conduit on the feast days. Children clap in rhythm. Someone sings, soft and off-key but earnest. On festival mornings, banners hang from windows. Cloth in green and red, bells tied with ribbons. Vendors decorate their carts. Pies are sweetened more than usual. Coins are tossed to singers. There is dancing sometimes, not planned, just born from a moment. Two girls twirling, laughing, skirts catching the wind. We gather in other ways too. At sunset, before curfew, neighbours linger near their doorsteps. They speak of the weather, of work, of aches and fevers. A boy shows his bruised knee. A woman passes a cup of broth to a friend. Someone plays a pipe. A dog barks. A baby giggles. These are not newsworthy things. They will not be written down. But they are the threads that hold the city together. Without them, the streets would be only stone. Even at night, there are gatherings. The evening markets, called Evinchipings, once filled the street after the last bell. People sold second-hand goods by lamplight. Old shoes, broken pots, scraps of cloth. But there was trouble too. Theft, gambling, unseen hands in the dark, and so they were banned, though they still rise now and then, like mist. A few candles flicker, a few coins change hands, a few eyes watch from behind half-closed shutters. There are always those who live in the cracks of the day, night walkers, wanderers, the quiet souls who cannot sleep, and sometimes I am one of them. I have walked the street alone long after the bells. I have stood by the cross and watched the stars appear, reflected in puddles, framed by spires. I have touched the conduit in silence, felt the cold of stone beneath my fingers, and I have remembered. The city lives not only in its work, but in its waiting. Not only in its noise, but in its stillness. The cross, the conduit. These are not just places. They are witnesses. They have seen our best and our worst. They have heard our laughter and our lies. They hold our memory more faithfully than any parchment. And so, when I walk by them, I nod. Not out of habit, but out of reverence, because these stones have stood longer than I have, and they will still be standing when I am gone. By midday, the streets are thick with sound. The calls of vendors, the grumble of carts, the chatter of those passing by. The city, so soft in its waking hours, now hums like a wheel in motion. And so we seek pause, a place just a step away from the noise, not far, not hidden, just sheltered, for a bit of warmth, for bread, for silence, if only for a while. On Bridge Street, not far from the river and close to the foot of the great stone bridge, stands the Star Inn. You wouldn't know it by size alone. Its front is simple. Beamed wood, whitewashed plaster, a faded sign hanging on a creaking hook. But inside, it stretches deeper than the eye expects. Rooms open like nested boxes, low beams overhead, fireplaces deep set in the walls, benches worn smooth by decades of elbows and cloaks and quiet waiting. This is where we come when the world is full. Not for celebration, not for revelry, though those have their place, but for a moment between the day's halves. I step through the wooden door, and the street disappears behind me. The sounds dim. The air grows warm. The scent of ale, half-smoke, and roasted onion settles on my shoulders. The tap room is dimly lit, even in midday. Light filters in through the windows, small, glazed with bubbled glass. Dust dances in the beams, golden and slow. At one table, two fishmongers speak in low tones, a half-eaten loaf between them. At another, a woman writes something on a wax tablet, her ale untouched beside her. No one rushes here. That is the gift of the inn. It is not home, and it is not the street. It is something in between. A shared hearth for strangers, a pause in the day's rhythm. The innkeeper's wife moves through the room with soft steps. She pours ale from a broad-bellied jug, refills a bowl of lentil stew. She hums as she works, a tune I half remember from my boyhood. The star has been here longer than I've been alive. Older men say it's been rebuilt 3 times. After a fire, after a roof collapse, after a flood. And yet, it feels unchanged. The walls bear carvings in their beams. Initials, dates, a crude star. Someone once scratched a prayer above the hearth. God keep this house, and all who rest within it. I sit at my usual spot, near the rear wall, beneath a little shelf where dried herbs hang. Rosemary, mostly, and sage. Their scent drifts faintly when the fire stirs. A boy brings a wooden cup of ale and sets it before me. He doesn't speak, just nods. He is new, I think, still learning the dance of the room. The ale is warm and soft, slightly cloudy. Not bitter, not strong, just enough to soften the edges of the day. There are no clocks here, only the slow guttering of the candle near the door, the occasional chime of a distant bell, the shift in light as the sun passes behind the roofline. In the next room, someone plays a lute. Just a few notes, nothing grand. A scale, a pause, then silence again. The walls hear everything. Whispers between merchants, laughter behind closed shutters, sometimes a quiet weeping when someone has lost more than they can say aloud. And the walls keep those secrets. They hold them the way a cloak holds warmth, close, unseen. This is not a place of ceremony. There are no fine linens, no silver cups. The floor is stone, swept clean but uneven. The tables bear the marks of time, knife cuts, ink stains, candle drips. And that is why we trust it. Here, no one asks too many questions. No one speaks too loud. You may join a table or sit alone. You may eat or simply hold your cup. You may come and go, and no one will mind. But if you stay long enough, you'll learn the rhythm. Bread is served with the ale, thick slices, slightly charred at the edge. There's a stew today, with barley and onion, and a bit of meat. Not much, but enough. Always enough. And if you need warmth, there is a stool near the fire. Always one. No matter how full the room, there is space for one more by the flames. In the corner, an older man speaks softly to a younger one. Teaching, perhaps. I hear the words apprentice and debt and honor. The younger nods, his hands clasped. He's listening as I once did, eager to understand a world that never quite explains itself. Outside, the city still turns. Carts roll by. Vendors shout. Somewhere a bell rings for the hour of noon. But inside the star, time folds in on itself. You do not count minutes here. You feel them. A hand around a warm cup. The weight of steam on your face. The way the wood beneath your palm is smooth where others have rested. The way the firelight dances on the beams above your head. We do not always notice these things. But when we do, they stay with us. I have sat at this table for 40 years. Not every day, of course, but often enough. I have watched boys become men, watched old men disappear, watched laughter rise and grief soften. I have seen a woman write her last letter here. I have seen 2 lovers meet in silence, their hands just brushing. I have seen quarrels born and mended both. And through it all, the inn has remained. The star is not famous. It does not host nobles or travellers from distant shores. But it holds the city in its walls, not the names written in books, but the faces you pass in the street. And that, I think, is more important, because we are not always remembered for what we built or own, but we are remembered for the spaces where we sat quietly, where we listened, where we shared bread. I finish my cup slowly. The boy comes to clear it, still silent. I nod again. He nods back. Then I stand, stretch gently, and step outside. The light is different now, softer, lower. The city feels quieter, even though it's still busy. I walk back toward Cheapside, my feet finding their rhythm. And behind me, the door to the Star swings shut with a low creak. A familiar sound, like the sigh of someone settling into sleep. Growing up is not a single moment. It is not one birthday, or one choice, or one lesson. It is a quiet unfolding, like a bud turning slowly toward light. And in this city, we grow not in leaps, but in layers. We are named, taught, trusted. We are sent out, pulled back, shaped like stone under water. Worn smooth by repetition, by duty, by care. My first memory of being watched came long before I understood why. Not scolded, not corrected, just observed. It was my mother, standing in the doorway. I was folding scraps of cloth, copying what I'd seen her do. She said nothing, but I remember the way her eyes softened. That was the beginning. Not of work, not yet, but of being seen, of being counted as part of something, of being given tasks, small at first. Hand me the brush, pour this carefully. Fetch the water, but mind the step. Those are the rites we remember, more than candles and choirs, though there were those too. Baptism was my first ceremony. I do not remember it, of course, but I have been told the story so many times I feel as though I do. It was winter. The church was cold. I was wrapped in 3 layers of cloth. My godfather held me awkwardly, and when the priest poured water over my forehead, I sputtered and blinked. They laughed. It is a soft sort of memory, made of other people's words. But in it, I became someone. I was named, and in naming, I was drawn into the circle of the city. That is how life begins here, not just with birth, but with belonging. In childhood, each stage is marked not by grandeur, but by trust. When you are old enough to go to the market alone, it is a right. When you are given a penny to spend wisely, it is a right. When your father lets you carry the keys for the first time, just for a day, it is a right. None of these are written down. No witnesses are called. But you remember them because they feel like doorways. You pass through. You do not come back unchanged. Girls mark their growth differently. They learn to stir the pot without spilling, to fold linen in a way that left no crease, to watch over younger siblings without forgetting the bread on the fire. When they reached a certain age, sometimes as young as 10 or 12, they were placed in service, in homes not their own. It was a hard thing, but it was also a sign of trust, a sign that they could be part of another household, that they could carry responsibility with grace. And so they packed their bundles, kissed their mothers goodbye, and walked away. Sometimes not far, just to the next lane, or to a cousin's shop on Watling Street. Sometimes across the city, to the homes of aldermen or merchants, with long staircases and wide hearths. But always they crossed a threshold. Their shoes were still the same, their hands still small, but something had shifted inside. Apprenticeship, too, was a right. For boys especially, it marked the formal end of childhood. The ceremony might be small, a signed contract, a handshake, a coin exchanged. But the meaning was large. You were now under someone else's roof. You rose with their bells. You ate at their table. You followed their rules. My apprenticeship began at 14. My mother wept, though she knew it was coming. She tied a little cloth packet and tucked it into my coat. A bone needle, a wax tablet, a twist of rosemary. To remember who you are, she said. The merchant to whom I was apprenticed was stern, but not unkind. He taught me the rhythms of trade, how to greet a customer, how to measure cloth by hand, how to keep the books dry in damp weather. But more than that, he taught me patience. How to wait without fidgeting. How to listen without interrupting. How to stand still when standing was all that was needed. These too are lessons. There were other rites, softer ones. The first time I lit a fire without help. The first time I mended a torn seam and wore it proudly. The first time someone asked my opinion and then took it. Not all rites are visible. Some happen inside you. One day, I no longer looked up when someone shouted in the street. One day, I no longer hesitated to cross the muddy path near the butcher's stall. One day, I realized I had walked from home to market and back again, without once thinking about which turn to take. That is how you know you've grown. Not because you feel taller, but because the city fits your feet. There are public rites too. Confirmations at church, First Communion, feast days when we walk in procession, singing as we pass the shops and stalls, weddings, christenings, funerals, always marked by bells. Even the dead follow ritual, candles lit, names read, soil scattered. The city acknowledges each change. It may not stop, but it notices. I remember a boy who lost his father. He walked differently afterward, shoulders higher, jaw set. We all saw it. And when his uncle placed a hand on his back at market the next day, no one said a word. But we knew. That was his right. Unspoken, but understood. In this city, growing is not something we chase. It is something that arrives like rain. It comes whether you notice or not. It soaks into your sleeves and your thoughts. And one day, you look down and find that your hands are not as small as they once were. You speak and people listen. You walk and children step aside. You reach the age when others look to you. And you do not know when it happened, only that it has. But still, the child remains, not gone, just folded in, like a letter tucked into a coat pocket, worn soft by time, but still legible. I still remember how it felt to be led by the hand, to sit beside my mother and hear her hum as she spun wool, to rest my head on a windowsill and watch rain make rivers in the dirt. Those memories are not far. They sit just behind my eyes. They rise when I pass a certain doorway, or hear a song sung in a voice too young to know its meaning. And so I carry them, because growing up is not the leaving of the child. It is the sheltering of them, gently, quietly, beneath layers of newness, until they are part of the whole, until they are not just who you were, but who you still are. The sun in London doesn't set all at once. It withdraws slowly, brushing the rooftops in gold before slipping behind the chimney tops. And when it does, something changes in the city. Not the shape of the streets, but the feel of them. As if the breath of the day has been held and is finally exhaled. Evening light softens the sharpness of things. Edges blur. Voices quiet. The air takes on a different scent. Less of ash and iron, more of bread and candle wax. I walk slowly down Bread Street, the shadows long and slanted. The shopkeepers are packing away their goods, tying cloth over baskets, shuttering windows. One man sweeps the threshold of his door with wide, careful strokes. The broom's bristles leave lines in the dust that will be gone by morning. A boy gathers rushes from the gutter, piling them into a woven sack. He whistles softly, tuneless, content. His mother calls from a doorway, and he runs to her, sack in tow. She tousles his hair before pulling the door shut behind them. The doors are closing one by one, not with urgency but with rhythm. This is the hour for folding things, cloth, bread, bodies into beds. The hour for warmth and for walls. The sunlight falls low, slipping through the alleys like gold dust. It lingers on the timber frames of the houses, makes the whitewashed plaster glow like cream. The rooftops are lit in stripes. Dark shadow, bright edge, soft shimmer. If you stand at the corner of Cheapside and watch the sun retreat, you can see the city become something else. Not less alive, just quieter, as if it is turning inward. Within the houses, evening begins in familiar ways. Fires are stirred, pots are set to simmer. Children are called in with soft voices. Cloth is shaken from windows, crumbs scattered to the street. My home, like many others, is narrow and tall. The lower floor belongs to the day, work, visitors, motion. But the upper floors belong to the evening, to rest, to small rituals, to the sounds of spoons against bowls and words spoken more softly than before. The walls are close, but comforting. Timber beams above, plaster below. Wooden shutters pull shut against the wind. A single candle on the table, its flame swaying slightly when someone passes. In our kitchen, the stew is modest. Lentils, carrot, a bone for flavour. But the bread is good, and the butter is soft. There is peace in that. We do not speak much while we eat. Not because we are sombre, but because the day has already said so much. Afterward, we sit. Someone mends a tunic. Someone else brushes crumbs into a pan. I sharpen a knife by feel alone. Stone against steel, slow and steady. Outside, the street has gone quiet. Only the faintest sounds remain. The creak of a cart returning late. The soft bark of a dog behind a shutter. The bell from a far-off church marking the hour. In the warmth of evening, time slows. Not in the way of waiting, but in the way of remembering. This is the time when stories are told. Not new ones, old ones, polished smooth by retelling. The story of the flood that reached the bakery. The story of the goose that followed a girl to church and honked through the entire sermon. The story of the uncle who once slept through Christmas bells and woke thinking it was spring. They are not grand stories, but they are ours. They belong to this house, to this city. They settle between the beams and echo in the walls. Even the floor creaks in familiar patterns. When the fire burns low, we prepare for sleep. The candles are snuffed. The shutters checked once more. Shoes placed neatly by the door. Water left in a basin in case thirst comes in the night. The beds are narrow but warm. Wool blankets, soft from use. Pillows filled with straw. A child murmurs in sleep. A door latch clicks shut. From the upper window, I look out across the rooftops. The last light of day is fading, soft and grey. Chimneys smoke gently. A sliver of moon waits behind a wisp of cloud. This, to me, is the most beautiful part of the city. Not its height, nor its bustle, but this hush. This closing of the day like a book well read. And still, even in this quiet, the city does not sleep entirely. Somewhere a midwife climbs a stair. Somewhere a clerk works by candlelight. Somewhere a woman sings to a child too restless to rest. The night has its own rhythm. But here, in this moment, I rest. The evening light may be gone, but it lingers in the timber, in the memory of windows glowing gold, in the stillness of a room held gently by sleep. And tomorrow, we will rise again. We will stir the fire, knead the bread, open the shutters. But for now, there is only this, the soft breath of sleep, the faint creak of beams, and the gentle hush of a city settling in for the night. At last, the final bell sounds, not the call of morning or midday, but the low, steady tone that marks the end. The day is finished. The streets are still. The city has drawn its blanket of darkness across its shoulders. We call it curfew. The word comes from cover fire, a time when hearths are banked, flames dimmed, and homes closed tight against the night. It begins with the bell from Cornhill, deep and slow, followed by others from the churches across the city, each tolling like a closing gate. Shops have long since shuttered. The markets stand empty, their stalls folded into neat piles. The rushes on the street are damp with dew, already softening underfoot. Doors are bolted, latches drawn, lamps snuffed, and yet the city does not fall completely silent. There are always those who move through the darkness. Watchmen, first of all, hired by the wards to patrol each lane and alley. They carry staffs and wear thick cloaks, their eyes accustomed to the half-light of moon and torch. They walk slowly, rhythmically, the tap of their boots echoing against the stones. Sometimes they call out the hour. Sometimes they say nothing at all. There are curfew breakers too, not criminals always, just those with cause to be out. A midwife summoned in haste, a servant sent to fetch a forgotten bundle, a man returning late from the alehouse with careful steps. And there are others, those without homes, those who sleep tucked into corners, under eaves, behind barrels, beneath thin cloths. Their breathing is part of the city's night rhythm too. The moon hangs low over the rooftops, casting pale light on the tiles and timber. Windows glimmer faintly where shutters have been left ajar. In some homes, candles still flicker. A mother rocks a restless child. A scribe copies a passage by lamplight, his quill scratching softly against the parchment. At the Eleanor Cross, the square stands empty. By day, it is full of life. Vendors, voices, the weight of commerce. But now it is quiet. The stone glows in the moonlight. Its carvings, saints, vines, angels, are silvered in shadow. I walk sometimes, late at night, not far, just enough to feel the hush. There is something sacred in this stillness, as if the city itself is breathing slowly, carefully, trying not to wake the sleeping within its walls. The conduit gurgles softly in the distance, its water flowing even now, though none come to fill their buckets at this hour. A cat slips across the lane, her tail curled like a question mark. She pauses to watch me, then vanishes between buildings, silent as smoke. The night smells different, less of fire and food, more of earth and damp wood. The air is cooler, touched with mist. Each breath feels like drinking something half forgotten. The streets are narrow, more so at night. Their walls seem to lean in, as if whispering to one another behind your back. You notice different things in the dark. The way a beam casts a shadow across stone, the curve of a doorway, the echo of your own footsteps. Everything becomes closer, not threatening, just intimate. Even your thoughts grow quieter. You remember things. A song your mother hummed, the feel of your father's coat, a promise made long ago and never quite broken. This is the hour when memory returns. The bells are still now. Their work is done until dawn. They have marked the day, its rise, its peak, its ebb. Now they rest, like everyone else. In the distance, a dog barks once, then silence again. Somewhere near the Guildhall, a shutter creaks open, then slowly closes. The wind slips through the alleys. Not sharp, just cool. It stirs a bit of parchment near the well. It flutters a sign hanging on its hook. It carries the scent of river water and distant hearths. Night is when the city hums to itself. You cannot hear it unless you are very still. But it's there. A low murmur in the stones. A breath between the chimneys. A kind of music without melody, known only to the walls and the night birds. The moon shifts behind a cloud. Darkness deepens. And yet there is comfort here. Not everyone fears the night. Not everyone sees it as a curtain drawn over danger. To some of us, it is a balm. The world has grown quiet enough to let the heart be heard. You walk, you listen. You rest your hand on the cool stone of a doorway and feel the city's age, older than any of us, older than any bell or bridge, and you are part of it. Even now, even in the dark, when I return home, the candle in the window has gone out. I step softly across the threshold. The floor creaks, just once, enough to remind me it is mine. Upstairs, the house is breathing. Someone murmurs in sleep. A cat settles at the foot of the bed. The coals in the hearth glow faintly, their warmth lingering like a farewell. I lie down, not with exhaustion, but with peace. The kind that comes only after a day well lived, a city well walked, a silence well kept. And as I close my eyes, the city remains. Around me, beneath me, within me, still turning, still whispering, still whole. Cities remember things, even when people forget. Not with names or records, though those help, but with the weight of footsteps, the warmth of hands on wood, the way a certain corner smells of rain and apples and old stone. London remembers. When I was young, I thought the city would always feel large, that I would never know every street, never learn all the alleyways and corners, never understand the rhythm of all its clocks and bells. But now, it feels smaller, not because it has shrunk, but because I have grown into it. I know which beam above the Star Inn creaks in winter. I know which stone near the Cheapside conduit always gathers rain. I know the smell of St. Mary Le Bow when the candles have just been snuffed. These are not facts. They are memories, stitched into me as surely as thread through cloth. When I walk now, it is not to discover. It is to remember, to nod at the places that held me, to pause by the walls that listened, to place my hand on doorways that once opened to my knock. Some buildings are gone. Some faces have faded. But the shape of the city remains. The way it leans, twists. The way it holds light in the late afternoon. The way it lets you feel small without ever making you feel lost. I often return to the places where the day began. Watling Street, quiet in the morning light. Bread Street, with its scent of ash and yeast. The Painted Celd, with its memories of whispered trade and tired hands. Each place holds a version of me, the child carrying water, the boy with ink on his fingers, the young man folding linen, the father nodding quietly at the cross as his children run ahead. I see them sometimes, not as ghosts but as echoes, moving just ahead of me. Turning corners I no longer chase, and I smile, because they are not gone. They are folded into the stones. All of us are. The woman who sold sweetmeats at the corner, the monk who counted fish bones in silence, the girl who tied lavender with string and left it near the well, the boy who tripped and scraped his knee and cried in his brother's arms, the ones who lived quietly, the ones who left nothing behind but the worn edge of a step. They are here, not written in books, but in brick, in timber, in cobblestone. I walk past my old home sometimes. It's changed. The shutters are new, the doorway cleaner, but the window on the upper floor still rattles when the wind comes from the east. That's enough for me. The city doesn't preserve things as they were. It preserves their shape, their presence, the space they filled, the hush they left behind. When we speak of London, we think of stone and trade, of kings and bridges and plague and fire. But I think of simpler things, of rushes on the floor, of bread cooling on a sill, of a bell rung not in warning but in welcome, of the way the light moves across a sleeping room at dusk. The city endures. It has seen war and joy and silence. It has outlived all of us. But within it are our softest hours, our slowest mornings, our kindest whispers. We are not carved into monuments, but we are remembered by the walls we leaned against, by the stools we warmed, by the shadows we cast when the sun sank low. One day, others will walk where we did. They will not know our names, but they will feel something familiar beneath their feet, a rhythm, a kindness, a hush, and perhaps they will pause, and perhaps they will listen to the bells, to the wind, to the memory held in the cobblestones, and the city will whisper back very softly, "I remember."